The photo was old, slightly faded at the edges, but clear enough to destroy everything in seconds. Emma had been cleaning the top shelf of the hallway closet when it slipped from inside a book and landed face up on the floor. She wasn't looking for answers. She wasn't suspicious. Until that moment, she had been happy. The picture showed Daniel standing beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a woman Emma had never seen before. The woman looked fragile, pale, but intimate, not like a stranger, not like a distant friend. His forehead rested gently against hers, eyes closed, as if the world outside that room didn't exist. Emma stared at it for a long time before her. Breathing changed. The date on the back was written in Daniel's handwriting. 3 months ago. 3 months ago. He had told her he was working overtime shifts at the warehouse. 3 months ago, he had canceled their anniversary dinner because he said he couldn't get off work. 3 months ago, he had lied. When Daniel walked through the front door that evening, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The house was too quiet. There's no music playing in the kitchen, no soft humming from the bedroom. He found Emma sitting at the dining table, the photo placed carefully in front of her like evidence in a courtroom. He didn't pretend not to recognize it. "You want to explain?" she asked, her voice calm in a way that scared him more than anger would have. Daniel's shoulders dropped slightly. Didn't reach for the photo. He didn't deny it. Simply sat down across from her and ran a hand through his hair, searching for words that felt smaller than the truth waiting behind. "Them. It's not what you think," he said softly. Emma gave a hollow laugh. "That line usually means, it is." He flinched slightly, but didn't argue. "Her name is Clara," he began carefully. "We grew up together, before you, before everything." Emma felt her chest tighten, but she remained still. "Me 3 months ago. She's sick. Terminal." The word terminal echoed in the room. "She didn't have anyone else," Daniel continued. "Her family's gone? No husband? No kids? She asked if I could just sit with her sometimes. She didn't want to die alone." Emma looked down at the photo again. "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Was afraid you'd misunderstand?" "I am misunderstanding," she replied sharply. "Because you lied." Silence stretched between them like a crack in glass. "I didn't want to bring death into this house," he said quietly. "You already lost your father in a hospital room. I didn't want to reopen that wound for you." Emma stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a harsh scrape against the floor. "You don't get to decide what I can handle," she said, her voice finally breaking. "You don't get to protect me with lies." Daniel didn't follow her when she walked toward the bedroom. He knew chasing her would only make it worse. He stayed seated, staring at the photo that had once represented compassion, but now felt like betrayal. That night, Emma packed a small suitcase. She didn't scream. She didn't cry in front of him. She simply paused at the door, her hand resting on the handle. "If she means that much to you," she said quietly, "maybe you should be with her." The door closed before Daniel could answer, and the next morning Clara's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The house felt hollow without Emma's presence, every small sound amplified by absence. Her coffee mug was still in the sink, her shoes still by the door. But the warmth that made the space feel alive was gone. At 6:17 a.m., his phone rang. He didn't need to check the caller ID to know it was the hospital. "Mr. Hayes?" The nurse's voice was calm but urgent. "Clara's condition has worsened overnight. If you want to see her, you should come now." The words pressed into his chest like weight. Daniel grabbed his jacket and keys, pausing only for a second at the front door. He stared at the quiet hallway, as if Emma might suddenly appear and tell him to stay. She didn't. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and inevitability. When he entered Clara's room, machines hummed softly, their rhythms uneven. She looked smaller than the woman in the photograph. Her once bright eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow, but when she sensed him, she smiled faintly. "You came?" she whispered. "Of course," Daniel said, pulling a chair close to her bed. Clara studied his face for a long moment. Out. It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded slowly. "I told you not to hide it," Clara said softly, her voice fragile but firm. Secrets always hurt more than truth. He looked down at his hands. I didn't want to complicate things. Clara let out a weak laugh. Life is complication. She reached for his hand, her grip light but intentional. You love her, she said quietly. I can see it every time you talk about her. Daniel's throat tightened. That's not the point. It is, Clara replied. You were never here because you still loved me. The machines beeped steadily. You were here because you didn't want me to be alone, she continued. And that's who you are. That's why she loves you. Daniel felt something crack inside him. I should have told her, he admitted. I thought I was protecting her. Clara closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. You weren't protecting her. You were protecting yourself from having to explain something complicated. Her honesty hurt. A doctor entered quietly, checking monitors, adjusting a line. Daniel watched the numbers flicker on the screen, each one a silent countdown. Clara squeezed his hand slightly. I don't regret calling you, she whispered, but I regret that it cost you something. It didn't cost me, he said quickly, but they both knew that wasn't true. Outside the hospital, Emma sat in her car in the parking lot across the street she hadn't meant to come. After leaving the house, she had driven aimlessly for hours, anger slowly mixing with doubt. She replayed Daniel's words over and over in her mind. Terminal, alone, no family. It wasn't jealousy that brought her here, it was uncertainty. From her car window, she could see the hospital entrance. She watched Daniel walk inside earlier that morning, shoulders heavy, steps hurried. He hadn't looked like a man choosing someone else. He had looked like a man losing someone twice. Inside the room, Clara's breathing began to change. Daniel leaned closer. There's something I need you to promise me, she whispered. He bent down, bringing his ear close to her lips. Don't let this break what you have, Clara said softly. Don't. Let my ending become the reason you lose your future. Her grip loosened. The monitor let out a long, continuous tone, and across the street. Emma's heart dropped before she even knew why. The sound of the flat line echoed longer in Daniel's mind than it did in the hospital room. Nurses moved quickly but gently, their faces calm in a way that made everything feel even more final. Daniel didn't cry at first. He simply stood there, still holding Clara's hand, even after the warmth began to fade. He had promised her something. He wasn't sure he knew how to keep it. Outside, Emma saw the nurse close the curtain halfway across the window. She didn't need medical training to understand what that meant. Something inside her twisted painfully. Whatever anger she had carried into the parking lot suddenly felt small and misplaced. Daniel walked out of the hospital nearly 40 minutes later. His face wasn't dramatic with grief. It was quiet, heavy. The kind of expression that doesn't perform for anyone. He paused at the entrance, staring at the sky like he was recalculating his place in it. Emma opened her car door before she could overthink it. Daniel, he froze. When he turned and saw her standing there, something in his posture shifted relief, guilt, confusion, all colliding at once. You're here, he said softly. I saw you go in, she admitted. I didn't know what I was hoping for. He nodded slowly. She's gone. The words landed between them without defense. Emma stepped closer, studying his face carefully. There were no traces of hidden affection, no secret longing, just exhaustion and loss. I didn't mean to make this about me, she said quietly. When I saw the photo, it felt like betrayal. But sitting out here, I realized something. Daniel waited. You didn't look like a man in love, she continued. You look like someone carrying responsibility. He exhaled deeply, as if he'd been holding that breath since the funeral. She was part of my past, he said, but not my future. Emma's voice softened. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you'd see exactly what you saw, he replied honestly. A secret, a connection that shouldn't exist. Emma's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I left because I felt replaced, she admitted. But standing here, I feel ashamed for thinking that. Daniel shook his head gently. You weren't wrong to feel hurt. I was wrong to hide it. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was processing. Did she suffer? Emma asked quietly. No, Daniel answered. She just let go. They stood there for a long moment, the hospital doors sliding open and closed behind them as strangers moved through their own tragedies. "She made me promise something," Daniel said suddenly. Emma's eyes lifted. "What?" "She told me not to let this break what we have." The wind moved softly between them. Emma swallowed hard. "She said that." Daniel nodded. "She knew I loved you." Emma's chest tightened in a way that felt both painful and healing. "Then maybe," she said slowly, "this isn't about choosing between past and present." Daniel stepped closer, careful, almost hesitant. "Then what is it?" "It's about trust," she replied. "And whether we're strong enough to survive uncomfortable truths." Daniel reached for her hand, not pulling, not demanding, just offering. She took it. Not because the hurt was gone, not because the confusion had vanished, but because love, when tested, doesn't disappear, clarifies. And in that hospital parking lot, between grief and misunderstanding, something fragile but real began to rebuild itself. Clara's funeral was small. There were no grand speeches, no long lines of mourners. Just a handful of hospital staff, a distant cousin, and Daniel standing quietly near the front. Emma stood beside him, not behind, not uncertain, simply present. The wind carried the scent of fresh earth as the casket was lowered. Daniel didn't look broken the way he had at the hospital. He looked reflective, thoughtful, as if he understood that Clara's final gift hadn't been her last words. It had been clarity. After the service, Emma walked with him toward the car. "I'm sorry she didn't have more people here," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "That's why I went." Emma glanced at him. "Not because you loved her." He shook his head gently.
"Okay, because..."
"No one should leave this world alone." That was the man she had fallen in love with. Later that evening, they returned home together for the first time since the argument. The house still carried the tension of unfinished words, but it no longer felt divided. Daniel set his keys on the counter, then turned toward her slowly. "I should have trusted you with the truth," he said, "even if it was messy." Emma stepped closer. "And I should have asked before assuming the worst." They stood there, neither rushing the moment nor dramatizing it. Healing didn't need volume. It needed honesty. Daniel walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer where he had placed the photograph. He returned to the living room holding it carefully. "I kept this because I didn't want to erase her," he said. "But I didn't realize hiding it would feel worse than explaining it." Emma looked at the image again. This time she didn't see betrayal. She saw compassion. "She was lucky to have you there," Emma said quietly. Daniel exhaled. "I was lucky to have you here." He placed the photograph inside a small memory box on the bookshelf, neither displayed nor hidden, just acknowledged. Weeks passed. Grief shifted from sharp pain to quiet memory. Clara became a story occasionally mentioned, not a shadow lingering in corners. Daniel and Emma began talking more openly than they had in years about fears, about past friendships, about uncomfortable truths they had once avoided. One evening, Emma sat beside him on the couch and asked, "If I had been the one in that hospital bed, would you have called someone?" Daniel didn't hesitate, as she nodded slowly. "Then I understand why she called you. It wasn't jealousy anymore, it was perspective. Trust rebuilt itself not through dramatic gestures, but through small, consistent transparency. Shared phone screens, open conversations, questions answered before suspicion could grow roots." Months later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Daniel and Emma walked past the hospital while holding hands. Neither of them stopped. But both of them felt it the reminder of how close misunderstanding had come to unraveling something permanent. Emma squeezed his hand gently. "Next time," she said softly, "we face things together." Daniel nodded. No more silent protection. They didn't pretend the hurt had never happened. They simply chose not to let it define them, because love isn't proven by perfection. It's proven by what survives when the truth gets uncomfortable. And sometimes the confession that breaks your heart is the very thing that keeps it whole.